Hey, good morning, Cesar. How you
Morning,
doing?
Sean. I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself? Everything good?
Oof, it is a lot of things in motion. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. Let's go ahead and start with you, please, Cesar.
Cesar Perez. I'm a local of the Coachella Valley, born and raised here. You could say I've always been an entrepreneur ever since I could remember, and I'm still one, and as well as a fighter, always fighting to get ahead in life. So, if I could sum it all up, I would say I'm a fighter.
Maybe one up. I think you're a warrior, man. I know you had some history. Well, even to this day, more of a passion project. You were building bows from scratch. Is that correct?
That is correct. I remember I was talking to one of my uncles or someone I knew from my childhood, and he was remembering with me. I had an uncle back in the day living with us or close to where I lived in Mecca, and I remember he built the first bow that I've ever used. It was from a tree, a mesquite tree, and he put it all together for me. And ever since then, I don't know how old I was back then. Maybe I was like 7 or 8 years old. Ever since I've had a passion for building bows because I saw that, and I guess it never left my mind.
Wow.
And then I turned it into a business, as you know.
Okay. And I guess fill in some of the progression from operating that business and then to where you are today, please.
So I started that business because what happened was back in so I started making bows like actually formally, like with what you could call a decent bow back in 2001. I remember this because of September 11. I was researching online, which the internet was brand new to me at that time, how to build bows and arrows. And I must have been, I believe I was in sixth grade. So I was doing that, and I just could never stay put, right? I was always trying to do something. So, began building bows then. And then fast forward to about 2009 or 10, I started a YouTube channel as well as a website, which is still up and running. It's called Legionnaire Archery. So when I started that,
Go ahead and check that out.
yeah, go ahead and check that out, guys. But when I started that, I did it. I just I was just putting stuff online, and I built a couple of bows. I wrote a couple of articles, and then people started hitting me up on the internet and sending me emails like, "Hey, can you build me a bow?" So the first bow I sold was a Cherokee style longbow, and I believe it was for a gentleman in the East Coast. I don't recall exactly what state, but the guy bought the bow from me. I shipped it over to him, and he recorded a video actually, which is still online. And it was just from there I just got more people to contact me. But mainly the reason I started that business was because I was at the university. I was going to CSU Stanislaus at that time, so it was in 2009 2010, and I was gonna get a job, and I just couldn't see myself flipping burgers.
Mm.
So I ended up going that route, and I used to sell the bows, and then I would also sell a couple of other items that I would make on my own, which were like crosses made out of horsehair nails. I mean horse shoe nails. My bad,
Mm, mhm.
horseshoe nails. Yeah, that was pretty interesting too. But that's how I kept some money flowing in, and that's how I could come back to the valley to visit my family with those funds.
Okay. And what was, to sum up, what maybe one of the biggest challenges that maybe just in business or in life that you kind of saw yourself being able to overcome through that experience?
For me, it's not necessarily a challenge, but whenever I see a problem, I always ask myself thousands of times, how am I going to resolve this? Or how am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? So
Mm.
I just keep asking that question
Wow.
over and over. And at the moment, it doesn't come to me, but eventually the answer reveals itself. So I've always had that mindset. I would say I do not know where this comes from, but I remember asking that question myself
It's the
multiple times.
warrior's blood.
I guess it might be. But, to answer that, yeah, I don't remember where that came from, but I do remember distinctly my father, he would always talk about, I guess, like overcoming obstacles and as well as working hard. And
Mm.
so for us, that's something that you take pride in. You work hard, and to a certain extent, you overcome things. So that's always been something that I pride myself in. I can overcome things. Like you said, it might be the warrior spirit, and that's something that I will instill in my legacy and my children.
Excellent. And how do you see that? I mean, that seems like a amazing frame or approach to really tackling any challenge. So how are you currently applying that? You are now a very successful insurance broker, as well as operating a few different ventures and businesses. Could you tell me a little bit how you're applying that? I know you focus on Medicare and
Mhm.
a few other products.
So one of the ways that I believe when I started back in 2012, I started in the insurance industry, insurance business. I actually got my license back in 2008, and
Wow.
I did sell a
10
couple
years
of,
before
yeah,
I did.
yeah, a couple of policies. I actually started selling life insurance, but since I was going to the university, I just ended up not, falling by the wayside, which is in this industry, what you learn is that after a year, out of 10 insurance professionals or out of 10 people that get their license, only one sticks around. And then if you count 10 years, 5 years after that, out of the people that stuck around, again, there's like a 80% fallout rate. So, I fell off after about a year, even though I made a couple of sales. But then in 2012, I came back. And my mindset was at that time was, this is option A, option B, and option C. So I'm going to make it happen, or it's going to happen some way, somehow. The reason for that was because the lady that did my tax returns said that everybody was going to need insurance because of the Affordable Care Act. So if I can say that I ever used my brain, at least it was in that moment I saw the opportunity. Something just bells in my mind went off. Like, hey, if everybody's gonna need insurance, somebody's gonna need to help them.
Right.
So I ended up getting the license again, and ever since I've been going after it. And as you know, so I would say, yeah, I'm successful so far, but there's a lot more ground to cover, and it's just a matter of sharpening the axe again and again and just keep going after it. So it's not necessarily where, oh, I've arrived. It's like, let me enjoy the process, and let's see how far I can get, right? So it's kind of like playing a game, and just you keep playing, never
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. And that brings me back even to when we first met and even started talking about working together in insurance. So just for a bit of background on myself, um, you know, back in 2018, I far less mature than I would say I am now. I really did not see myself with the level of purpose and direction that I do now. And I think similarly, like, you know, I didn't always know how I was gonna navigate the things that were coming up in the day to day in my life. But there was always something in the back of my mind that like I just didn't like, yeah, I had stressful days. And I do, to this day. But it becomes less and less. It's like building up muscle, or building up resistance. Building up calluses on your hands. You desensitize to an extent. The wildness and craziness that you experience every day. So at that time, the big slap in my face was I essentially got kicked out of school. I transferred to UCSD, I believe in 2016 fall. 1 year later, I was essentially flunking out after, being essentially a straight A student throughout high school and community college. And I'm I'm now, I have to take a year. I can't come back for a year. What am I going to do? Like, what am I doing? Right? What am I going to do with my life? Fortunately, I had a very good friend group at that time. One of my best friends at the time, his father decided. hey, I want to inspire my son and his best friend
Mhm.
Sean to, you know, get a little bit more self-driven, kind of start a bit of an entrepreneurial journey, and uh, signed us up for a 1 month boot camp, so to speak, for life and health insurance. Um, that was at the end of 2017, like November, December, and we took the first slot. There's tests every month. January, mid January of 2018, we both passed our tests, got our licenses as life and health insurance agents in the state of California. I know you have licenses in a few other states as well, so that's also something interesting to balance. And we actually were focused on insurance as well. I didn't even know that I could focus or do Medicare. Like, that wasn't really in my purview and my scope. And so we were focused on a product called Index Universal Life, which we'll touch on later in this discussion. And so we start figuring things out. We're prospecting in you know more affluent areas. We're targeting higher net worth clients. That was kind of our focus, and it's interesting because there's always a balance of, do you focus on more volume and lower value transactions when it comes to business in general, or do you focus on higher ticket or higher value transactions? So in a sense, we were more focused on the upper end of that spectrum, in that we were, really trying to network and meet doctors. We were going to like Ferrari events at Ferrari San Diego, um, you know, all sorts of these.
How old were you at the time?
2018, I think I was 20, so six years back. So yeah, 23, 24. So, yeah, I mean, it was it's so much. I mean, even then, like, you know, just having that spirit to go out and do it, because
Mhm.
I was way more I don't know if introverted is the right word, because I've actually found that I'm quite naturally extroverted. I just It took a while for me to come into that realization, if that makes sense. Like, okay, maybe to summarize it well, there was a moment where something clicked in my mind, where I realized, wait, why am I like not speaking up? Why am I not, vocalizing myself? Why am I not sharing? Why am like I want to. So what's actually stopping me? It was just never having done it.
Mhm.
So I started doing it, and I was like, wait, I actually I love being like this. This feels more me than ever being like more, I had this weird dynamic where I was like a class clown in like middle school, but like when I wasn't making a joke, or like, kind of maybe annoying my teachers or my professors with my antics, I was a bit more calm and reserved. So it was an interesting dynamic. But yeah, so I was 23, 24 at the time, and I didn't even realize, and that's the thing, that there's always a process to anything you're trying to achieve. I didn't even realize that I was gaining so much experience, even though I felt like I was falling on my
Mhm.
face so hard, and I was so uncomfortable. Like, because my friend's father, he would, hey, cold call a billionaire.
Mhm.
I did that. You know how many
Wow.
seconds he gave me? Not minutes, about 28 seconds.
Wow.
But he imparted a nice little, piece of wisdom on me, which was essentially just in a nutshell, nicely, hey, just keep going after what you're going for. What you're offering me is not anything I'm interested in, but I appreciate the call and have a nice day. Hung up. But so
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's pretty interesting because if now knowing what you know, just ask yourself this: would you trust a 23-year-old with whatever wealth you have surmised so far in your life?
Mm.
just at first thought, right? Without really knowing this person,
Oh, 100% no.
right? Yeah. So my point just being, because when we're in that particular, I guess when you're in the moment, you don't really look at it the whole picture sometimes, and being younger, sometimes you don't have that perspective. So then it's good that you went after it and you fell on your face. That's awesome, but it was not gonna work. Like 99% of the time, it's not gonna work, right?
Well, here's why too, because here was my scope. My scope was I'm looking for people that I can make my first $100,000 premium, or like a
Right.
high premium, whether it be an annuity or an index universal
Hmm.
life, or other type of life insurance policy. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna make a high commission on some of these products. And so
Hmm.
my focus was on what am I getting out of this? It wasn't so much focused on what value can I provide them, even though maybe intrinsically, like, I'm doing all that work, like, right,
Hmm.
I'm taking hours to run an illustration and say, hey, look,
Hmm.
I'll chop this up a million different ways. Like,
Hmm.
do you want the most conservative? Do you want a very aggressive? Do you want something in the middle? Do you want 2 years conservative, 3 years aggressive? Because based on where you think the market's going to be now and in 2 or 3 years. But in my mind, I'm just eyeing what my reward is. But really, I think it's more about how can we help others. A lot, like, because especially when it comes to money, when it comes to your estate, and everything like that billionaire has worked towards in his life. I mean, I would you would I think you'd be hard pressed to find that he doesn't want to have all of that protected and properly transferred, from generation to generation down to his sons and daughters. So yeah, very thank you. That was a good point to highlight and even
Hmm.
reflect on. I hadn't thought of that.
It's just a reflection because, so, not to downplay anything. So when, as you were asking me, like, what my story and where I come from, I did realize that sometimes, because as I went through it, I might have downplayed a few things. Which, what I mean by that is not downplayed it, but maybe all of the struggles internally, and that's the important part, the internal struggles that you go through on a day by day basis. So, like I said to you in the beginning, well, that was my plan A, B, and C. So, like, basically for me, I was burning all my bridges, or burning all the boats, and just going
Mm.
forward with insurance. And yes, I mean, I still did the bows and arrows initially in the beginning to make some income, but I knew that ultimately this was my mission to set up an insurance agency, right? However, now it's been what, like 10 years, a little bit over 10 years, and all of that time you can lose a lot of things in just saying, oh, it's been now 10 years. Like, all those struggles, all the mental struggles, which sometimes, you're in the bottom, sometimes you're on top, you go back to the bottom. What I mean by that is, you don't always feel like you're making progress. And when you fall flat on your face, like you mentioned, hey, I lost a deal, or I didn't make it happen, or whatever the case might have been. So those struggles are real, and you will go through those. It's just a matter of just bouncing back and making sure that you keep the eye on the price, and going back up and finding ways to re-inspire yourself and remotivate yourself, and staying disciplined. Because discipline doesn't matter if you are motivated or not, you're going to do what you have to do to make things happen. And that's something that I've always try to achieve. And I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy. It's not easy. That's why not many people get to this level. So I now own an office, and I do have a team, and so I am finding that there are more challenges that are coming up ahead. But one thing that I am doing is I am enjoying the process, and I am finding ways to make things essentially go downhill as opposed to an uphill battle, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Trying to put it on coast or cruise control. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent point. So I just want to bring us to the present. so I was struggling through all of that with the Index Universal Life, and then I came to a point where I was actually really starting to, I had a strong sales pipeline. I had a lot of leads that I was working simultaneously, and a year has gone by, right? And I needed like, so the whole reason that that started is because I got kicked out of school.
Hmm.
It was now fall of 2018, and I was able to re-enroll in classes. And so I was actually originally studying mechanical and aerospace engineering, which is at the time was an impacted major. I was able to get in when I had first transferred. When I came back, well, I'm skipping a big point, which is that I ultimately made the decision to cut, and I knew it wasn't an end. It wasn't a stop, but it was a pause on the insurance because I was like, "Oh, I'm really liking this." Like I was having so much
Hmm.
fun with the math, and also, I was starting to find that, hey, I like interacting with people. I went back to school, majors impacted. I had to switch, ended up going for physics. Didn't realize that that's an even hard, like my purview, my scope was so narrow at that time. So I think that's a large thing for myself is like having, even though we're very focused in our day to day, zooming out and then like where am I in a week? Where am I in a month? A year? And even extracting that out to 10 years, because having that vision, is gonna really make that road a lot straighter and a lot smoother, right? Because there's gonna be curves. And like you said, so you're finding your way. How do I make this a downhill? Also, how do I make this road as straight as possible? It's not always gonna be straight, but it is what it is. So I then finished my major in astrophysics. I had been maintaining my license that entire time because I said, "Hey, this is not like I'm coming back to this." I worked a few years as an engineer, and I'm still doing some engineering work. And now I'm currently we've built up an AI application. We're working on some tools to integrate into the medical and healthcare fields and industries, as well as building up now my book of business in Medicare. When we met
Hmm.
about going on 2
2
years or a
years,
year
yeah.
and a half or so, you helped bring me back into the insurance and yeah, into the insurance field. I'm glad I kept my license active. I've learned a lot about Medicare. Um, for you, you're now at a point, like you said, you have an office, you have a team, and we're part of the same team together. So where do you see the current state of Medicare? What has been going on in the last few years? With one point to highlight, I know last year we had such a huge scramble here out in
Hmm.
the Coachella Valley, Palm Desert, Palm Springs area. We had one of our medical groups cut ties, or sorry,
Insurance company,
cease
yeah.
cease to exist,
Hmm.
and that had a major impact on the community.
Yeah, so over 4,000 beneficiaries who lost their insurance. So there was a lot of opportunity where we were able to switch them, or they essentially they had to pick a different plan. So that was definitely something major that happened here, and we were able to capture many of those lives and able to set them up the proper way and have them choose essentially a plan that would work for them. But the state of Medicare, to answer your question, Sean, what do I see, or the way I see it? Well, there's there's 10,000 people a day turning 65, and that's a well-known fact. That's going to continue until 2030 at least, and then beyond that, there's still going to be people, turning 65. Not 10,000, but maybe only 8,000 or 7,000, right? But essentially, it's still a lot of people. So I don't foresee that Medicare number one is going away. What we are starting to see is that, so if you're in the industry here with me, so we have Medicare Supplement and Medicare Advantage, and what's being offered now mostly is going to be is Medicare Advantage. In the past, there was a lot more Medicare Supplement, but given that there's some cost savings for both the government and for both the people when it comes to Medicare Advantage. Everything points that the trend is going to go towards Medicare Advantage in most of the areas of the country. Medicare Supplement, you do have to pay out of pocket, as you know, with the rising inflation. Number one, that's going to increase the premiums on Medicare supplements, in my opinion, as well as, well, because people, essentially, inflation is taking a toll on people's monthly budgets, and anybody who's on Medicare, they're probably on a budget because they're older and they're not working, they're not employed anymore for the most part. So therefore, they're going to need to not add any more expenses to their budget. Rather, they're going to need to cut expenses, and if they can, one of the ways that's going to happen is they're going to choose a plan that's not going to charge them a premium. And even some of the plans nowadays, there's some rebate plans that refund people, or they actually give you money to be on that plan. So that's a couple of plans we have here locally are doing that. And so we see a lot of people pay attention to that, and they want to be on those plans because, hey, inflation's coming up and they need to eat, right? They still need to eat, so they want something that's going to give them, their health benefits, but as well as maybe some money back, especially, if they're healthier.
Okay. One point I'm taking from that is we have inflation absolutely going wild. And you noted that on the Medicare supplement plans, you see that the premiums are going to increase. So is that on people signing up for new plans, or is that current enrollees? Like
Oh,
what someone has, let's say they have a plan J or a plan N, how are they going to be impacted?
actually, those plans will increase even faster. The reason being is because it's a self population of people. So, like, let's say anybody's on Plan J, which is an older plan that is no longer offered to anybody. That means that whoever's on Plan J, let's say there used to be 10,000 people on Plan J, right? On with this particular company, whatever company, it might be United Healthcare or whoever it is.
Mhm.
So, as people age, what tends to happen?
Costs go up because their care requirements are increasing.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's more claims, right? If there's more claims in that specific group of 10,000, and then let's say people are dying off, so that group, instead of 10,000 people paying a premium, it's now going to be 8,000. So there's less money. So, and then there's more costs. So the insurance company, they have to raise the premiums up, right?
Wow.
In order for them to make up for, number one, the rising cost of care, number two, the less premiums coming into their coffers, because there's people, they're losing beneficiaries, right? People are dying off because most of the people that are on those plans, they're older. So as an example, let's say somebody's on a newer plan and they start off, they just turn 65, they go on a Medicare supplement. Well, because a lot more people are turning 65 and they're coming into that plan, there's going to be a spread of costs across the board and across more beneficiaries. Therefore, the cost is not going to rise up as quickly, even though it's going to go up because expenses are probably going to go up, especially with inflation. The rates of claims is gonna increase naturally. So therefore, they're probably gonna see an increase, but not as much as the person who's on an older plan that's being phased out. So those people are gonna expect to see higher rate increases.
And I just wanted to highlight a point that might not be well observed or known or mentioned. So you're saying at the same time as costs all across the board are going up, the pool of people paying into the plan is shrinking, correct?
That's on an older plan because nobody else can join that plan. If that
Right.
makes sense, right?
And so how's and just as a high level, insurance essentially works. Could you elaborate on that? So we have a smaller pool, so
Mhm.
that plan is essentially able to survive because it has a group of people paying into it, correct?
Yes. So essentially, the premise of insurance is you distribute your risk amongst a large number of people, a large pool of people. Therefore, you might be paying a premium, but you're not using the insurance. but your neighbor, he went into the hospital. Therefore, everybody's premium helps pay his cost, as well as everything, all the other costs associated, plus the profits of the insurance companies. Obviously, as the pool gets smaller, then there's less money to go around. Therefore, the insurance company has to jack up rates to make sure they're able to make up for this loss of revenue or loss of claims paying ability.
Right. Or even in a local case in San Diego, uh, we're seeing that Scripps Medical Group, including Scripps Coastal Medical and all of their outlying doctor groups within that group, are unfortunately no longer going to be working with Medicare Advantage plans coming in 2024. And I think that's a case where the costs were just, the numbers
Mhm.
were just not adding up for them.
It might have been that, or it might just also be very political. What I mean by very very political is, yeah, it has to do with money. They
Hmm.
might have they might have wanted to negotiate a better contract with the medical groups, and if the medical groups did not agree, then obviously they just said, you know what, we're just going to cut ties. However, I believe that's going to be short lived, because if the trends are going to Medicare Advantage, you just saw one of your clients. What did she end up doing?
Well, she left Scripps.
There you
She
go.
didn't she didn't want to increase her monthly cost, as you were
Exactly.
touching on just a few minutes ago. And even whether or not she's in a place to afford it or not, she maybe her case is a bit different. She hasn't been with she's more
Mhm,
recently localized to
mhm,
the greater San Diego region, but she was willing to make that trade off,
mhm,
and at least when we went through it, we were able to find her a PCP to her needs. We addressed her biggest likes and
mhm,
dislikes over the last year. Fortunately, not too many dislikes, but at the same time, okay, so how do we replace that? So yeah, we ultimately did come to the conclusion to switch to one, another insurance carrier, and
mhm,
two, another medical group that is providing all of that service for her, because for her the priority was maintaining her costs, not having to drive too far out. She still currently drives, and then also not necessarily having too much additional complexity. Right now, she
mhm,
had things simple with her current plan that will continue through the end of this year, as well as they will continuously be fairly simple under a Part C, Medicare Part C, or Medicare
mhm.
Advantage plan going into 2024 with a different carrier and different medical group.
Right. Yeah. So essentially, out of the thousands of people that belong to that hospital network, which was the Sharps,
Scripps,
Scripps. I'm sorry.
and
Yeah,
she actually
yeah.
is now
She's now in
on the
Sharps. Yeah,
Sharp group.
yeah. So for Scripps, out of the thousands of people that been affected by this change,
Thirty
maybe,
thirty two
yeah,
thousand
yeah.
in
So out of
California
those
in San Diego.
32,000 people, maybe if they keep 15,000, in my opinion, they're gonna be lucky if they
Right.
keep 15,000.
And that's kind of moving through some hoops, so to speak. That's through like an Aetna,
Hmm.
a United Healthcare, or a Humana PPO plan,
Right.
where they're contracting with the
Hmm.
hospitals and then having individualized contracts with the doctors. So you're gonna have to have you're gonna have to reach out and make that connection. Will the doctor accept this coverage, PPO out of network, and
Hmm.
then those associated out of network costs as well?
Exactly. In my opinion, or I don't know any of the particulars, but just from a very high level, from a bird's overview, I believe that they're gonna probably come back eventually in a
Mm,
couple of years maybe and recontract, because they're going to see the loss of revenue. If everything's headed that direction, they're going to have to make a change, and maybe they're doing this to wait it out and to see if they can get a better contract and a better rate, which is essentially what it boils down to. So we'll see what happens, but I have a suspicion that it's going to come back to the way it was, where they're going to recontract with these MA Medicare Advantage plans. But time, only time can tell.
Yeah. I mean, just to wrap up on that point, I mean, it's absolutely wild because I actually have my care through Scripps, and you know one of my nurses is at retirement age, and
Hmm.
she's been a nurse with Scripps for 30 some odd years, and now she's looking at Medicare plans, Medicare
Hmm.
supplement plans, Medicare Advantage plans, and she had her mind set on a Medicare Advantage plan that would work with Scripps. She's been with them for, I'm assuming the majority of her
Hmm.
career, and she wants to stay with them, and now she can't. So it's a mess. But so I guess to leave that point, the year's not over, and we might still see some changes yet to come, or
Hmm.
even if not this year, but next year. I
Hmm.
want to transition now into annuities, and maybe we can start. I think that's a term that sometimes gets a lot of confusion, maybe some stigma around it. Just in your words, could you just highlight what you summarize or see an annuity as?
Oh, and annuity, if I were to just summarize it, I would say it's a high yield savings account with an insurance company. That's as simple as it gets. Back in the day, you mentioned there might be a stigma around annuities. Yeah, there was a stigma because mm, in other days, like maybe 30, 40 years ago, when you had an annuity, it was basically you're trading your cash. So maybe you had a lump sum of money. You were trading that lump sum for a monthly stipend or a monthly pension, and you could no longer have access to the money. So you locked up the money and you were getting a monthly amount with a set percentage rate of return. So it might have been 5, 6, 7, 8% rate of return, and you were getting this either for a number of years or for the rest of your life. So you could essentially annuitize. It's called annuitizing your dollars. And the only problem is you would lose access to your lump sum in exchange for a monthly amount. So that's why sometimes people have a stigma to it because they think they're going to lose access to their money when somebody says annuity. And to a certain extent, I believe that a lot of the older population, not so much anymore, but a few years back, they might have been a little bit scared of it. But like I said, not so much anymore. We have annuities are now they're way different, and you have access to your funds, and there's different types of annuities, and they can absolutely yield a great rate of return as compared to other safe vehicles for investing. So I would say the annuities that we have access to nowadays are far superior financial products than anything you could have gotten in the past from an insurance company.
So you said, and I know you highlighted a couple of things, but maybe could you expand or reiterate? You said now there's a lot of changes recently to annuities. What has improved? What is making them perhaps more approachable or more accessible now?
So essentially, it's access to your capital as well as the rates of return that you can get on an annuity. Essentially, there is different types, but you still have your basic annuity, which is called a single premium immediate annuity, which is what we were talking, where you lose access to your money, but you get a monthly amount. You still have that type of annuity, and that can be very beneficial to somebody who things that they might blow the money if they have access to it, right? So that could be something very responsible for somebody to do,
Uh,
especially if they know they have an issue, right? Where they know, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily want to have access to this money because I might end up, spending it, and then there goes my livelihood or what, there it goes. So that you still have that. Then you have what's called fixed annuity, essentially what I mentioned before, a high yield savings account with an insurance company. However, well, it does give you a lot of flexibility when you have a fixed annuity because let's say you have what we call a multi year guaranteed annuity. It's going to guarantee a rate of return for a number of years. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a 3 year or a 5 year annuity. Right now, the rates are around 5% rate of return. So if you have $100,000, you can stick it into one of these products. You're going to get 5% for those 3 or 5 years. guaranteed no matter what. Even if rates come down, yours is going to stay the same, right? And then what's going to happen is during those first 3 or 5 years, your money you have access to, on depending on the company, some will give you access to the interest, and some will give you access to up to 10% of the money without paying any type of penalty, which is absolutely fantastic
Is that
because
at any given point, like that 10%, or throughout a year
uh,
or for a certain period?
at any given point throughout those 3 to 5 years. So let's say you decide to stick it in there for 3 years, you can have access to 10% of the account value. So as an example, let's say you have $100,000, you can take up to $10,000 in that year. But if you don't take anything out and next year you have 105,000 because you've earned 5%, then obviously you have access to 10,500, right?
Okay,
So
so in that case, the MIGA
yeah.
is sometimes referred to as. So what happens after the 5 years?
So
Do
after
you
you have access, depending on how long you keep it. If it's three, if you made the contract for 3 years, after the 3 years, you have access to 100% of the money, and you can keep it in there. The nice thing about an annuity is, like, if it's just regular funds, you're not going to pay taxes until you actually withdraw the money, and you're only going to pay taxes on the gain. So it's tax deferred.
oh,
So like it's different. Like if you go into a bank and you do a CD, you have to pay taxes the same year that you earn the money. Whereas in an annuity, you don't have to pay the taxes. Therefore, you have tax deferral growth as well as compounding. It compounds. You have compound interest because you're earning interest the second year on the money that you've earned, right? So that's one of the nice things about it, in a MIGA, multi-year guaranteed annuity, as well as obviously, once the period, we call it a surrender period, once that is over, if it's 3 years or 5 years, then you have access to as much money as you need, right?
okay. And so you were saying this is something interesting for me. So you do a CD through a bank, but you're doing an annuity through an
An
insurance
insurance
company.
company,
Could
yes.
you elaborate on that? Like, how does that work, or where does the insurance company play into that?
The insurance company takes your money. So, like, same thing as when you do a CD with a bank, they will take your money and they will lend it out or whatever they do with the money, right? They will earn a rate of return and they will give you a rate of return, right?
Mm.
It's the same exact thing with an insurance company, except they won't lend it out. They might do investments in whatever it is that in their portfolio they have certain investments. So they know they're going to get X amount. So then they know they can pay you X amount or Y amount, whatever it is, right? So essentially, it's the same thing. It's just different guarantees that you get when you go through an insurance company. I believe it's a lot more friendly and you get better rates, right? Based on what I see in the market, you get better rates with the insurance company, as well as you get the protections, meaning that for the most part, the money is guaranteed on the claims paying ability of an insurance company. And for the most part, many of the insurance carriers that are solid, that are rated as an A or A plus,
Mhm.
they have been around for over 100 years and they've never skipped a beat,
And it's funny, I
right?
was just going to touch on that. I mean, some of these insurance companies have been over, I think, oh, I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head. Could it be Pacific Life? But I know if some of them
Hmm.
have been around, the number sticking in my head is 168 years.
Yeah.
Maybe a year or two since I've picked up that metric.
There's one of the companies that was started in England. It's over 260 years old, and it's still around. So, if you do the math, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, and so if they can guarantee a rate of return for your money, you could pretty much bet that it's safe. And
Right.
even if there is an issue, generally they will have reinsurance. So all of the insurance companies, specifically the life insurance companies, they will reinsure each other. And so this is a way to give the clients a certain level of confidence in that, nothing's going to happen, right? Because if one of them goes under, that's going to create a reputation. So it's not going to be beneficial for any one of the companies. Therefore, it's in their best interest to stick together and make sure that
Mhm.
nothing
Uphold
happens.
the
Yeah,
industry.
exactly, to uphold the industry. And not only that, but they are regulated by each of the states they operate in. And they are very strict when it comes to insurance companies. They have to, I believe they have to submit their quarterly financials, and they're always being checked on by the insurance commissioners of every state that they operate in.
Wow. Okay. And so an annuity is essentially like now I'm seeing it
Mhm.
like an alternative to a CD from the bank, an alternative to like a government bond. This is a very seems like a powerful investment vehicle. And you're also mentioning that it's tax deferred. So I mean, uh, is this something that you could toss against like a 401k? I mean,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, you can actually put your 401k into an annuity, which I normally help people do. I do that often, very
wow.
often, because a lot of the people that have a 401k, they're invested in the market,
And
right?
how could someone reach you if they wanted to talk to you about
They
that?
can
Please go
they
ahead and
they can give me a call,
okay.
760-200-6244. Again, 760-200-6244. They
And
can give
where's your
us a call.
office located?
Office is in Indio, California, off of Highway 111 in Monroe. It's 81 953, Highway 111, Suite 4, Indio, California 92201. That's where we're at.
Perfect. I'll be
And
sure to highlight
yeah,
that on
yeah.
the
Thank you. I
mhm.
appreciate that. But essentially, to the point of you had asked regarding if I'm sorry, what was the question?
Against the
Oh,
401k.
yes.
Because well, what stuck with me was ooh, tax deferred.
hmm
So
Yeah. So when it's in a 401k, what we do is we roll it over into an IRA. Right. We roll it over into an IRA. The person that's typically that has it in a 401k either is no longer working at their employer or they're retiring and they're a lot older. So number one, what they want to guarantee is they want to guarantee that that money is not gonna go, it's not gonna go down. So I had a lady last week. She came into the office and from previous statement that she had received, which was back in April and May, she had a balance of $191,000. We called in. It's now October, so we called in, and now the balance had gone from 191 to 184. So in those short months, she had lost $7,000. So she was a little ticked off, like, "Oh God, it's been only been a few months, and now I'm $7,000 down.
yeah.
Like, what's going on, right?" Essentially, what we ended up, or what we're gonna be doing, is we're transferring that 401k into an annuity within an IRA. Therefore, it's gonna not be taxed until she starts pulling the money out, right? And she's gonna have some growth in in that fund still. So she might start off at 184, but as the years go by, she might end up back at 200, 300, 400,000, right? So the way and essentially the product that I helped this lady put her money in was, it's called, also, it's a fixed indexed annuity, which is similar to a fixed annuity. However, she can actually make up to about 12% rate of return in a
Yeah.
given year, which is
On a fixed
absolutely
rate.
on a fixed, yeah, it's a fixed annuity essentially. What that means is the money cannot ever go down, but it can go up to 12%.
Okay.
So
So it has a floor and a cap.
it has a floor and a cap. So essentially, the worst case scenario is she doesn't make any money. There's also a fixed account within the annuity. So if in one particular year we just want to make sure she earns something, we can just stick the money into the fixed account and it's going to earn a 4% guaranteed rate of return. But if she wants to, quote unquote, be in the market, or
Sure.
she can put the money, we can put the money in the market account, and the worst case scenario is you don't make any money if the market goes down. Best case scenario, if the market does 20%, you're going to do 12%, or even if it does 15%, you're still going to get your 12%. If it does 10, you get your 10. So you could make up to the 12%, but no less, no more than that, and no less than 0%.
Wow. Okay. So earlier I mentioned we would come back and speak about index universal
hmm
life insurance policies. And I think that's a great point to transition into that because similar to that last fixed annuity that you were discussing, it also, in certain cases,
hmm
has a floor and a variable cap depending on plans and riders. What? So, just to distinguish, what is now the difference between an annuity as an investment vehicle? Is an index universal life insurance policy also something we can use in an investment vehicle? Can you touch on that?
It's very similar the way the work, the way the investment portion or the way the account portion of the account works is essentially the same. The only difference is when you add a life insurance portion to it, you're essentially adding the cost of insurance to the
Mm,
contract,
mhm,
right? Because if something happens to you, your family gets life insurance, gets a death benefit
mhm,
from it. The other thing that you're adding when it comes to life insurance, and this is what makes it so powerful, what makes the index universal life so powerful, is that you're adding, number one, you already have that tax deferral that we talked about with an annuity, but then you're also adding the ability to get a loan, quote unquote.
mm,
What that means is that essentially you can take your money out tax free when you need it because it's a quote unquote loan. If you've been around the industry, you know that there's different types of loans in a life insurance contract. There's also withdrawals. You can do a withdrawal and then you can transition. Once you take out your principal, you can transition into what we call loans. It's a withdrawal to basis, and then you transition into loans. And you could do a wash loan. A wash loan essentially it just means that you're gonna pay, let's say you pay a 3% interest on that loan, but then the insurance company is going to credit you 3% on that same money.
mm.
So essentially it's 0% that you're paying. So, you're not really paying anything for the loan,
Okay.
if that makes sense. It's a difficult concept to wrap your head around, but just to make it really simple to understand is it's essentially a withdrawal, and there's really no tax implications around it, even if you're taking money after you withdrew your basis, your principal amount that you invest or that you put into the policy. So let's say hypothetically you put in throughout the years, you put in $100,000 into a policy, and now your policy grew, the amount that's in the policy with compounding interest, let's say it grew to 400,000, you have a gain of 300,000. So if you take out withdrawals up to 100,000, obviously you're not going to get taxed on that because that's the money you put into it. But then anything over that, if you withdraw, you will pay taxes on because it's a gain, right?
Ah,
But then
okay.
if you do a wash loan, you can essentially not pay any taxes because it's a quote unquote a loan. It's kind of like the same concept as you have a house and you bought it for 100,000 and now it's worth 500,000. Then you can go to the bank and you can ask for a loan of 300,000 and they'll give it to you all day long and you don't have to pay any taxes on that equity that you took out of the house, right? You will pay an interest rate, which is right. You'll pay an interest rate at the bank, but here with your insurance company, if you have a index universal life policy, you could do a wash loan and essentially not pay any interest on that money. So that's the beautiful thing of an IUL.
Wow. And I just want to reinforce. So, okay. So we have the option to roll over the 401k
Mm-hmm.
into an IRA
Mm-hmm.
for an annuity. And if we're doing a similar transaction of rolling over a 401k into a life insurance policy, specifically an IUL, so now we're looking at the additional
Let
cost of the insurance itself.
let me stop you there. It is possible, but it's very complex if you're trying to go from 401k to a life insurance policy.
Okay.
That's something that you have to be very careful with.
Right. Because now
Mhm.
we're dealing with insurance premiums that we're paying. Is that not correct?
Well, mainly because you're not transferring it to a like product. So, like a 401k is just a tax code. So, if you transfer a 401k into an IRA, essentially you can do that all day long. But if you can't transfer a 401k into a life insurance product or a policy because you have to cash out the 401k, pay all the taxes, and then you can dump in the money into a
So
life
there
insurance
would be a
contract.
little bit of an upfront potential cost
Uh-huh.
to make that to make a similar change.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
so
that's a distinction. That's
hmm
good to highlight on.
yeah, so you want to be careful if you're
Mm,
going to be trying to do that or if somebody's telling you to do that, just be very careful with that because there are tax consequences to that and it might be better for you not to do that, right? So you have to really run the numbers and make sure that it makes sense.
okay. Wow. I guess that's why we have experts like yourself to
Yeah, no,
onto it.
I've studied this in length. So when I started back in 2012, I started life insurance, and I remember, during those days, I just wanted to understand the whole chassis of the IULs because I wasn't sure. Hey, if I'm going to offer this to my prospects, my clients, I need to make sure that it's going to work. Why? Because it's my reputation at stake. If I want to
Hmm.
be in this for the long run, I would hate for somebody to say, "Oh, this guy screwed me," right? So I would spend hours upon hours reading all the material. So I really understand how it works. And sometimes, to my detriment, if I try to explain it to somebody, it might just not make sense to them. So now I just do a very basic overview of how it works because it makes more sense, right?
Okay.
So I do understand it, and I make sure that at least I hit on the important points and not so much on the in-depth items because it will confuse people. It will confuse people.
Right. I mean, just look at and we won't go into it, but you have the fixed account, you have
Hmm.
the market account and an index universal life, or even in the annuity account. And because of that, there's some interesting ways to have splits. We won't go into that, but yeah,
Hmm.
it helps have some advantageous situations when you are taking out those loans. Now, to wrap up, I just wanted to distinguish also between something that a product that has not the best reputation, because that was a word that stuck with me, is variable universal life versus an index universal life. Could you differentiate those a bit?
Yeah, for a variable product, a variable means that you actually put the money that's inside of the
And
investment
I'll
account.
add one more thing, and then can you tie that at the end? How are we getting this? Okay, you touched on it, but a little bit more detail maybe on the zero
Floor.
percent floor and then
The
cap
cap.
rates on
Okay.
it. Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. So on a variable product, it's called variable because you are actually invested in the market. So you have a life insurance policy, and then the fund that grows tax deferred is actually invested in the market. So that means that it can go down. So, like, if the market goes down, what you have inside of that account will go down.
Mm.
In an index universal life, the money is not actually in the market. It will reflect the gains of the market up to a certain amount, but any losses are not going to be reflected because the way it's invested, to answer your question about caps and floors, is that the money is actually, so when you have an insurance company giving you an quote unquote index account, if you put the money in there, you're foregoing their fixed rate of return. So the
Sure.
fixed rate of return might be 4%. So
Mhm.
instead of giving you the 4%, they're going to spend that 4% that they were going to give you to purchase options. And then what happens is if the option goes up in value at the end of that year, then you get credited with the interest rate up to that
The
the
cap by
cap.
executing that option
Exactly.
contract.
And if the option expires and it's worthless, then you essentially gain nothing because you forwent your fixed rate of return, if that makes sense.
Right, because you're letting it expire
Hmm.
because potentially the market's leveled or
Hmm.
gone down,
Hmm.
and you don't necessarily want to
Right.
execute that contract. Wow. Okay.
Exactly. And so that's how they're able to have a floor and a cap.
Okay.
So they'll keep any excess. So like if the market went up higher, then the company's keeping the excess, and they're giving you your cap.
No, but that sounds like a worthwhile price to pay because especially when you look at compound interest. I mean, the biggest detriment or enemy of compound interest
Mhm.
is compound loss. When you have
Yeah.
1 year, you mentioned your client with the 191,000
Hmm.
roughly going to what was it, 184.
184. Yeah,
So
184.
yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow when you see that $7,000 loss.
Especially when somebody's older. They're already, lady was 65
Mhm.
years of age. And so she's like, she doesn't have the time to recoup that investment.
Yeah.
Imagine if that was a 20% loss on her account, that would have been like over $30,000 of loss. For her to make that up, it might take another 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. So she doesn't have that. She can't afford to wait that long for her to get that money back, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Somebody that's young, like maybe yourself and myself, hey, we could probably stick around and make sure the money comes back. But at the end of the day, it generally works out better because when you have one of these products, you're freezing your gains. So every time you gain money, it's like a step. You step up, and that money can never go back down. So essentially, you're just stepping up, stepping up, stepping up every time.
Staircase or
Yeah,
ladder.
staircase, exactly. Essentially, that's what's happening. And so, if you do the math, you actually your average rate of return sometimes is higher because of that, because you're avoiding losses. Yeah, because if you think about it, when you lose, let's say we have $100,000, if you lose, just to keep it round numbers, if you lose 50%, your account drops to 50,000, right?
Right.
Let's say you gain 50% of 50,000, you're only at 75%, right? You're only at 75,000.
Which is still 75% of your basis.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so tough.
Exactly. So that's the reason why we always say zero is your hero when it comes to like indexed annuities or indexed universal life policies.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much, Cesar, to our
Yeah.
local hero here in the Coachella Valley. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Sean. I'm sure we'll have another one here coming up, and we'll definitely maybe talk about other items, because I know there's a lot of material on the table left.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Cesar.
Perfect.
They all wanna hate on me now. Why you disrespecting the boy? That's just confirmation that I'ma win. The beat getting beat up, I'm violent. I'm smooth like I'm C on the violin. I try, if I fail, I'ma try again. No denying it. I know I was built for this. I would die, I would kill for this. I showed them 1,000 times.